Good evening. The Plymouth Charter Commission, meeting in the Great Hall in Plymouth on April 11th, will come to order. And the first item will be the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. A few opening words, which you've heard before. This meeting is hybrid. It's in person, as well as via a Zoom webinar, and can be viewed live on the local government channel 15 Comcast and 47 Verizon. This meeting is being recorded. Zoom attendees must register using the Zoom webinar link on the charter page of the town website. And Zoom attendees, for public comment, please use the raise your hand icon on the lower portion of your screen. In-person audience, for public comment, please use the podium and place your name on the sign-in sheet. So we have 6 members present on the panel, or 7 members present on the panel, and I see 2 by Zoom. By Zoom would be Wrestling Brewster and Frank Mann. So the Charter Commission is 100% here tonight. So this evening, we have some business to take care of, and we're sort of starting a whole new chapter of the Commission's deliberations. We have 5 months to go before our preliminary report is due. I think we need to step up the pace, so we would meet every Monday, starting tonight, except for the holidays, and it's going to be a kind of a constitutional convention type atmosphere, I think, in the hot summer, but we got to get it done. We like Philadelphia. The first item of business is to follow up last week's meeting and choose the folks that are going to help us. We looked at 2 separate categories of services. One was the Collins Center of Public Management at the University of Massachusetts in Boston, and then we looked at 2 law firms. So tonight, let's discuss which one of them, or who, or if any of them, we will ask to help us. Our budget called for this. We predicted about now that we would need the consultants and counsel. So let's have a free-ranging discussion and talk about who we're going to hire. And first would be the Collins Center. We heard from Mike Ward last week, who's the executive director, and a couple of their staff members. And their function, as you gathered from the meeting, is that they are the leading charter consultants basically in Massachusetts and have their hands and have been involved in so many charters across the state. They're not legal counsel. They may have some lawyers, but they're not functioning as lawyers. They're functioning on how to put together a charter. And we'll come to that in a couple of minutes, but how I think we should proceed. But let's talk about the Collins Center. Do they have a role that they can help us in? Comments, please. David Malaguti.
I was very impressed with their presentation. They seem to be very informative, have a lot of knowledge, so I would greatly support them as being one of our counsel, shall we say, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
Consultant.
Other comment? Bill Cohen.
I think they all, the 3 presentations were, I thought that all of the attorneys and the firms that presented to us had taken the time to understand where we were coming from, and they all had very strong credentials. But I thought the University of Massachusetts Boston campus, that institute that presented their approach, I feel very comfortable moving ahead and working with the institute.
Okay. Other comment? Barry. Mr. Pizer.
I have been familiar with the Collins Institute as clerk. We had received their literature. They're avid, they're interested, and from what I know from other towns, they're good to work with. So I would further support our making a connection with the Collins Institute.
Thank you.
I was not able to hear the presentation, but I had done research on Collins a couple months ago. Remember, I think I shared that
Yes.
them with you, and they are deeply experienced. I think something like 18 or 20 different towns and cities over the past 10 years. So they've got the deep experience that would be useful to this commission.
Okay, Betsy Hall.
Would we need to hire a separate legal counsel, or would they represent us as legal as well?
Say again, Betsy.
Would, if we have Collins, then would we need separate legal counsel, or will they also function as
No,
our
they
legal
can't
counsel?
function as legal counsel. They would work with legal counsel, but as I see, the purpose of a lawyer is to kind of look at things once they're done, to be sure they're legal. Help us if we do have a legal question of whether something is legally correct or not, but would not be involved on a day-to-day or even a week-to-week basis. They're there when we need them, and we could use them. But I don't think they're the primary mover here when we're putting together the charter.
So we would be using both the Collins
Did you make a
group
motion?
as well as a legal
Okay.
counsel, and that would be within our budget.
All right. Is there a motion to,
Whoa, 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 whoa.
That was a question. Would that be within our budget?
anybody from Zoom want to speak?
Yeah, I'm
Wrestling.
with Betty on this. My question would be, one, if we need a separate council, is that in our budget? And if so, okay, but if not, then, we might want to look at the more legal counsel people. I just have concerns that, if we go with someone who doesn't have legal counsel, it's not our legal counsel, that we're going to have to pay for legal counsel as well.
I think, good point, Wrestling. I think when we put together the budget, though, we did contemplate the direction we'd be headed, and I believe I can say safely the budget would allow us to kind of have the best of both worlds, would allow us to work with Collins Center on a very close basis with their expertise in putting together sections of the charter. It would also allow us to hire counsel to act as a kind of a standby basis. We could do both, and I really think we're going to have money left over. When it's over, I'd like to be able to finish on time and on budget.
So,
So I think that what I thought was interesting was that when you embark on something like this and you're involved in hiring lawyers to do everything from point A to point B, you do start to generate a higher cost. I thought it was interesting to take advantage of the Collins Institute at University of Massachusetts that's very proficient at this, utilizing them in a very cost-efficient way. Obviously, we're going to have attorneys look at the final product, but in this way, we're kind of having the best of both worlds. We're getting the Institute, we're getting their experience, and then we're calling in the attorneys when necessary, because they're the ones that drive up the cost. So it actually, it might sound like because we're working with the Collins Institute and looking at a firm, it might sound like it's more of an expense, but actually, its ability to control cost by not always having to have the lawyer being on the clock.
Other comment?
I had a comment.
Frank?
Mr. Chairman. Yes, I think the discussion is answering some of my questions, but what I was concerned with was, especially if we didn't hire a law firm, would we have some built-in conflicts with trying to change the charter and having to rely on the town council and them being essentially, supportive of the existing status quo. And so I'm also wondering, we've had these now interviews, are we considering these law firms to be also representative in case we need legal assistance or legal clarification? Because I did like the first, I don't have my notes in front of me, I'm in Tennessee, and they don't allow any notes, when you cross borders, but I did think that they had a kind of simpatico perspective, especially the attorney that spoke about the kind of, for want of a better word, creativity that we want to show in this modified charter. So I don't know what the process would be. Do we look for a different attorney if we hire the Collins Institute, or do we look to these two institutes we already interviewed?
I think what I would like to see happen would be for us to choose, if we all agree, choose on the Collins Center to help us with the real heavy lifting with the charter. One thing they can do, well, let me back up a bit. We, as you all know, we really went through the charter for 2 years very recently, in 2017. We got down into the weeds. We reviewed every single line in the charter from the first page all the way through it. Very, very detailed. That's one way of going through a charter. The other way would be to try to look to see what needs to be fixed. What major things in your charter need to be fixed, rewritten, perhaps thrown out, perhaps a whole new provision put in. And the Collins Center are excellent at doing that. If we think we have a problem, for example, with our Advisory and Finance Committee, and it needs to be fixed in certain respects, they can tell us, what's worked in 6 towns, what hasn't worked in these towns over here, and they have great experience in what does work and what doesn't work, so we don't waste a lot of time coming up with solutions that are simply not going to work. But I think I think that's the beauty of the Collins Center, to help us revamp things on a broad, perhaps dramatic basis in our charter. We don't need to get down into the weeds again and worry about pronouns and nouns and verbs. We've done that. The law firm, whichever one we choose, which we can have in addition to the Collins Center, would just be there, though, for a legal question, which we would pose to them. They'd write a memorandum if we want one or whatever, but they'd be much less hands-on involved on a day-to-day basis. And as I say, we basically have 2 choices. There were 2 firms here last week. And I should tell you, too, I've written twice now to Copeland and Page, just so they didn't feel like they were left out of this competition. But I haven't had any kind of a enthusiastic response. So I'm just as happy to have independent counsel here that we don't feel beholden to. It does give this panel independence, which I think is good. One of the things we're going to talk about in the charter is town council. I think it's going to be a subject. In any event, I think we've certainly extended ourselves to Copeland and Page. We don't have to do it any further at this point. In looking at the amount of the budget that was approved by town meeting, I think we can certainly do the Collins Center, because I know what they charge towns like Framingham and Amherst, towns that they've done. And they're considerably less than a law firm where you have a partner or an associate or whatever sitting with you during your deliberations. I just think we don't need that at this point. But we can still have lawyers available when we need to call them for specific tasks. So I think we could really do both. We could choose Collins Center and then pick a law firm who would be available to answer questions at the end of the process in September. When we do our first draft, they would review it for legality, but their involvement would be much less day-to-day than the Collins Center. That's my view. And I think tonight, if we can get a vote on who we want to hire, and if you choose to, if you can authorize me, I would try to negotiate a business arrangement with them to present to you the week after that, and we'll be off and running. Let's first, yes, Betsy.
I would like to move that we choose the Collins Center for our representation,
Betsy makes a
consultation.
motion to choose Collins Center as to work with us in developing the charter. Is
Do
there a
we,
second?
do we?
I'll second.
Just second on the,
David Beck seconds, and now it's
Second.
discussion.
okay, discussion on the motion, okay. Do we want to also make in the motion that I can do just that, what you just said, where you would enter into a discussion with them and arrange, okay,
You mean to work out a business arrangement?
business
Contract.
arrangement, contract, okay.
So Betsy, is that Bill would like to amend that motion to allow us to also to negotiate the business, okay? Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
In favor, thank you. Scott, in favor? What? Yes, unanimous, good. Nobody's opposed, thank you. So that being done, the way I was going to suggest we proceed, unless somebody has another way of doing this, rather than open up the charter and start the first chapter, I'd like this idea of looking for things and discussing them tonight that needs to be fixed, making a list. And the list would, for example, obvious things that we should look at would be the Committee of Precinct Chairs, one item. Certainly the Advisory and Finance Committee, the Select Board, the town meeting itself, the moderator, planning and the master plan and how it's followed or not followed. I mean, what's its role in the town, or is it just sitting there kind of isolated? The whole referendum process, it's a whole chapter in our charter. And then a few new items that I was looking at that maybe want to add to the charter, and one of them Mr. Hutchinson's going to talk to us tonight about, but perhaps to add to the charter would be the whole section on communications and interfacing with the public, looking out rather than the public looking in to kind of see what we're doing here. We would be looking more, turning it around 180 degrees and presenting ourselves to the public in a much more public fashion so they know what the town is. When I say we, I mean the town of Plymouth at this point. So it would be a more public-facing municipal government with communications highlighted. And Joe has given this some thought. He has prepared in a few minutes to talk to us he's got some slides on how he would go about getting this chapter into our charter. Another new item in the charter could be the whole voting setup. Climate change, which we talked about with Patrick one night. I mean, these are all things we can certainly add to the charter, but I think this is, to me, would be more fruitful than trying to do it on a page-by-page basis. So, for example, if we started off with whichever one you want, but if we started like with COPC, we could get all our ideas together, everyone who's already made a suggestion, and just start discussing it with the Collins people to guide us. Has anybody else done something like this, kind of steering us along the way, what might work, what wouldn't, and until we finish that topic. And then go on to the next one. We might want to have a whole dig deep into the select board and how it should function, has functioned, might be elected, perhaps be elected by precinct. I mean, there are a lot of ways the board could be changed. And certainly its functions would be a part of that topic. And then we would do that with these other key boards in the town. And when we get finished, if we have time, we could always go back into the details of the charter. But I feel kind of we've done that, at least at that level. We don't need to start, certainly don't need to start that way. Yes, Larry.
That is one way of doing it, and I already gave away several times the prime topic on my mind, which is planning. And I don't have an objection if we start with the select board to say that, I've already written it out, that their primary responsibility ought to be planning. But I'm going to end up saying the same thing about the planning board, so that we can do it either work center by work center, or topic, have specific topics that apply
Right.
broadly. Either way is going to work for me.
You know, I was wondering about that because I was thinking today of this discussion. When you mention one board, immediately it might interplay with another board in some fashion. I think you made that point. So, but we still have to start with a board, and if it does interplay, we'll kind of have a little play saver and we got to remember what we just did with the select board. We got to talk about the planning board, Board of Appeals. I mean, there are interrelationships, but we still have to center on a board at a time. Betsy?
Yes, thank you, Bill. I like what you said about going item by item. I'm wondering if we could make it even a little broader, focus on the legislative branch, and then focus on the executive branch, because there's a lot of
Right.
interrelationship within that. So rather than going, say, from Charter Commission
Well, I
to
think
Select
that-
Board, back to Advisory and Finance, but stick
Right.
with that. And I do have one question, and this is something I just don't want to forget. In our charter, 235, it says that the precinct chairperson shall meet within 30 days, and then 211, it says that so it's 211.4, that they have to meet within 45 days. And it's exactly the same language, except for the difference in the two number of days. So I don't know if everybody has their charter with them, in that book, in that manila envelope that Michelle gave us. If you look at page 4,
Wouldn't that be the
Item-
weeds that
item
we're talking about?
235, it says the precinct chairperson shall meet within 30 days following the town election. But then, 211.4, it says the precinct chairperson shall meet together within 45 days. So I think one or the other
Yeah,
is
we gotta fix it,
correct.
right.
So I think we need to just take one of those out. And
Yeah.
Oh, that's too minor.
Betsy, I thought
unless
your,
there's a reason for it that I don't know.
I think your idea is a good one about kind of taking one branch at a time. I mean, we could, start we could start with the executive branch, do select board, or we could start with the legislative branch and do, moderator, town meeting, advisory and finance committee, and COPC. And, things that stay within the legislative branch. That's a good idea.
So anyway,
But
maybe you can look at that later, what I just mentioned.
You can
about the
decide how we
number of
want to start.
days. I just that I don't want to lose track of that because it's a
Right.
complete contradiction. So
Well,
it's a very small thing to talk about.
Yes.
It's either 30 days or it's 45 days, and we can be done with it, So that's why I brought it up.
So
'Cause
how do you
I-
want to handle these things like that? You find discrepancies or inconsistencies, just put them on a list. And then we could be sure we take care of them. A list, and Michelle could keep the list. A master list of minor fixes and edits that we have to make. Right, good. So I think, why don't we pick a topic then, or pick a branch starting, and then a topic within the branch, and let's see what needs to be fixed. David?
Well, following up on that, because I've been thinking about it a lot, and I put some of the thoughts about FinCom
Yep.
to you a couple weeks ago, is that also in the spirit of, if not a council this time, but thinking of a future thing and giving more power and authority to the COPC as sort of representing our executive committee of town meeting, is the thought I have, especially when it's becoming 18 people. And that as we describe their potential powers, that could include appointments, which include potentially they appoint FinCom, possibly they appoint the moderator, but in the spirit of town meeting is sacrosanct. Town meeting is the representative of the town, and it's really what's governing things, and our executive board is to follow in a way, be supported by the legislative branch. So without diving into the weeds of the details, but I would propose we consider the COPC as the executive committee of town meeting. Yeah.
You say we would start with that?
Yeah, just start with that as an idea, and then the roles of what they could be doing.
Right. I think
Within that, but then you have full town meeting, as we've heard from, the public over the months, but we have sort of, if one's the House of Representatives and the Senate, but in this case, I think the word executive committee becomes, they meet monthly or maybe more than monthly, and we describe their responsibilities, but they are still town meeting, and they are elected. So I just propose that as sort of a governing way to look at town meeting, legislative branch, and the COPC.
Yeah, I think this was the beauty, what Betsy suggested, was that we start with a branch. In this case, we're going to start good suggestion, we start with the legislative branch. And I think that's important that the COPC, as I see the COPC, it is a legislative body working from, basically its authority, I think, comes from the town meeting. And you're calling it an executive committee or whatever we call it. I mean, it's a function of the town meeting. I think it's important to point this out, that it's not competing with the select board, which is the executive branch. The COPC is the legislative branch. We're going to keep them straight. And I think it's a good idea to start with the legislative branch. And we're not going to discuss the select board or planning unless it, of course, Larry would like to, perhaps it does come in. It would.
Does.
Yeah. But I think it's good to make it clear that when we're discussing the COPC, nobody should feel threatened by that. It's to make town meeting work better and function as a legislative body. So, David.
In regards to the COPC, I would like to see them hear and recommend to town meeting all non-financial articles. Keep the finance committee doing the financial articles, let COPC handle the others. Now, we have to be careful because we don't want to overburden the COPC either. But I would like to see, and again, I'll just throw this out for discussion, I would like to see our 15-member finance committee, perhaps 5 members appointed by the moderator, 5 members appointed by the COPC, 5 members appointed by the Board of Selectmen.
So let's keep, Michelle, you're keeping a list here, right? So David, you've suggested that we start by saying that the COPC would have the function of recommending non-financial articles to town meeting. But
Correct.
Presumably not zoning articles.
No, all of the other, I should have said not zoning, no.
Right.
Could
Bill.
I, so, why wouldn't zoning articles be heard by the Committee of Precinct Chairs? It's not a financial article. The FinCom should be focused on financial
I
articles.
guess the question is whether the planning board handles it or exclusively or not.
No, I think that in the end, town meeting is gonna have to vote on zoning.
Right.
So somebody has to hear it, make a recommendation to them.
Right.
I think the Committee of Precinct Chairs should hear those zoning articles and send them back. I've watched zoning articles go before the FinCom, and it gets a little confusing because their expertise is about raising and appropriating and money and revolving funds and all the different, obligations of a FinCom. I think what has to happen is, it would be very good to have the Committee of Precinct Chairs look at those articles, discuss those articles, and then send them to the legislative body to vote on them, because they would have had an
I think-
engagement on the its before it hits the
Right.
floor.
I think that makes sense. I mean, the planning board originates a zoning article. I think it needs another set of eyes before it gets voted on, another, like the precinct chairs.
And I have no problem with that, I just don't want to overburden the Committee of Precinct Chairs. So that's my only concern, I have no problem with that.
But realistically, we might get, David, how many zoning articles go to town meeting? We might, that are not administrative. There might be some administrative type thing that we have to straighten out, but it's, the
It's a
last
couple.
one we
It's
had
a
was,
couple. With the ADU, the accessory.
that was
dwelling
2
unit.
town meeting, that was last fall.
Right.
So we get like
So-
1 or 2 town meeting. It's not
It's,
a strenuous thing.
It's interesting, when the precinct chairs was first proposed and put into effect, the first Committee of Precinct Chairs tried to take that position, that their function did include reviewing all non-financial articles. And actually, that went to town meeting, and at that point in time, town meeting decided that was too much. But I think that was, 15 years ago? I mean, I think that issue should be revisited, and I do think that the precinct chairs is an appropriate group to do this. Larry?
I'm not sure it has to be either or. Having been to town meetings, almost as many as you, first of all, it's not necessarily the case that zoning articles are initiated by the planning board,
Right.
only sort of theoretically. In real life,
Right.
They come from outside for the most
But
part.
they write a report on all the zoning articles.
But they do write a report.
Right.
But the report gets buried. And it seems to me that I always wanted to know from the experts, which is what the planning board is supposed to be, what they thought and why they thought a zoning article ought to pass or ought not to pass. They have a legal responsibility according to chapter 41 and 41A of Mass General Laws. But in addition to that, it seems to me that if we're going to start divvying up the responsibility for advising town meeting, we want the planning board to be part of it for zoning articles.
I
You
think,
say, and the precinct chairs.
It could be the precinct chairs if the I mean, eventually, town meeting is going to get their hands
Right.
on it, so the non-experts in the legislative world, I don't have a problem with the,
Right.
with COPC getting getting it, but first, then we need to express the idea that the planning board
Right.
has to make an opinion.
Chair?
yes, so, somebody else wants to talk? I think we got wrestling. Did I jump in front of you?
Whatever.
I just
Bill
think.
Cohan, then wrestling. Go ahead.
And then Betsy, down the end there. I just wanted to just point out, when a zoning article is on the way to town meeting, it's going to the planning board. The planning board's gonna have a hearing, they're gonna talk about it, and they're gonna send their recommendations to us, to town meeting. This is only increasing that due diligence, where FinCom would not hear the article, it would just go to precinct chairs, they would hear it, debate it, and send it to town meeting. And because town meeting has that responsibility of the bylaw changes, they're in charge of that zoning bylaw, so I think it goes that route. We want planning to weigh in on it. They're gonna have a hearing like they always do, they always have a hearing, they put it on their agenda, and they talk about it, and they send their recommendations to town meeting. So I wouldn't touch that process. I would just move the process right now where it's going to FinCom, over to the committee precinct chairs, they hear it, it goes to town meeting. I think then enough eyes have looked at it to start a healthy debate at town meeting.
No, this is a zoning article?
Be a zoning article,
Okay,
yep.
just go through the steps one more time.
Whether the planning board initiates it, because they can, or whether it is a petitioned article,
Right.
any zoning article is going to be heard by the planning board. They're going to weigh in on it. They're going to have a hearing, they're going to put it on their agenda,
to.
and they're going to discuss it. Then they're going to send that recommendation to the committee of precinct chairs and town meeting. Committee of precinct chairs hears it and makes the formal recommendation to town meeting, and town meeting
Just
then
like the
debates it.
finance committee would today, but we take that
Yep.
power then shifts to the precinct chairs.
Yep, I think wrestling's next.
Wrestling?
Yeah, I think we need to define what we want the precinct chairs to be, really. I've been on the precinct chairs for a number of years, and recently I was asked by the precinct chairs to go to the selectmen on a couple of different articles. I hate to say it, but the lack of respect was just astounding. And I think that's something we need to define, how precinct chairs is an arm of town meeting, and that, they're not gonna tell the selectmen what to do, but they're gonna let the selectmen know what the town, since they're representing the town, they need to have some sort of, look, we pulled our precincts, we're talking to people. I'm looking at the fiasco of the horse racing track. It's whether it's good or bad, the town has come out and said, we don't want it. And I think that we really needed to find that precinct chairs to say, look, when they come before the selectmen, they're speaking for town meeting. And there's needs to be some sort of oomph, for lack of a better term.
Right. Betsy?
Yes. One of the things I think that would help what David was saying about overburdening the chair, the chairman of each precinct, would be for us to define the roles of each person in the committee of precinct chairs, and as well as in the precincts. For example, I was chairman, I don't know how many years, but if I became chairman again, if I were elected chairman again, I would ask the vice president to post the meetings and to do a lot of the, or the secretary, to do a lot of the things that just take up time and that are a little bit burdensome, because the chairman is the one who would attend the meetings and so forth of the committee of precinct chairs. So it seems to me maybe the vice chairman, that would be a good role for them, and maybe we even want to define it, I'm not sure, in the charter. But if we define the different roles, I think it would be less burdensome to be a chairman and take away some of
Right.
that time.
I think part of the problem over the years has been there's so little in the charter defining the role of the precinct chairs. It's very, very scanty, and we need to spell it out. And if they had certain defined rules right in the charter, that's what's needed.
And to go along with what David said, or maybe it wasn't David, but
Larry
what
was-
someone said was that there's not, I think it was you, no, maybe it was Bill, I don't know. There's not a lot of respect for, no, it was wrestling, not a lot of respect for the COPC, but I think that sort of also drifts into town meeting, that sometimes the town meeting is not getting the respect that town meeting deserves, and so we need to, look at all of that.
No, but if you arm the precinct chairs with a series of specifically worded, defined functions in the charter, I think that's what's needed. Mr. Pfizer.
Okay, and so it begins. We're talking about how town meeting is going to become informed in order to fulfill its responsibility to vote on specific activities. The planning board does respond because they must, according to state law, on zoning articles. I have never known how a zoning article connects with the long-term goals of the town. And it seems to me that what we need is for the planning board to be specifically tasked in every instance that there is a zoning article to explain to town meeting how that fits with, and this is going to require them to do more planning, but how it fits with the policies that the town has adopted.
Right.
That is step one. I think we need to deal with the question of respect. If the committee of precinct chairs is seen as a competitor, then we can worry about whether there's respect. But if the committee of precinct chairs is an element of the legislative branch, and the select board is an element of the executive branch, respect comes because it's deserved, and don't have to worry about what one group thinks, and nor ought there to be competition. When, in the present circumstance, the Advisory and Finance Committee and the Select Board disagree, yep, goes to town meeting, and town meeting decides which is which, and it's not a matter of disrespect in either case.
Just a point, and Bill, then you're next. I just want to comment on what Larry said about the planning board. I've had exactly the same view you have through many town meetings, when I thought the planning board should take a zoning article and be its champion at town meeting, particularly if it originated with the planning board. I mean, this, it's a key function, and it always disturbed me to see the planning board not saying anything when the article originated in the planning department. I mean, that to me is crucial. Bill?
No, I agree. I think that, as the Finance Advisory Committee has to get up at town meeting and make a recommendation, I think that we need to hear from the planning board on their opinion of the article that is changing our zoning bylaw. I do believe that there has to be some clarification that builds in events that defines respect. So I'm very careful about making sure that our committee of precinct chairs, we're not empowering them to be in competition with another branch of the government. We just want to clarify where there should be some accountability such as legislative oversight. So we're touching on these things, not really moving more power over to the committee of precinct chairs and making them in competition with other branches of the government, but finding that level of respect, as wrestling has indicated, but in the form of some sort of enforcement. That in the past, there's been a great deal of concern about articles that have gone to town meeting that have been voted on, and after town meeting, the way that it goes is that the town manager meets with staff and doles out those articles for them to bring it to fruition. And some of these articles do not get appointed to anyone, and they just sit there in age. There is no fail-safe measure that addresses that matter. So right now, it is the Board of Selectmen's warrant, articles go on it, and they pass at town meeting, and then the town manager has that responsibility. But the committee and precinct chairs could have some enforcement authority so that there is some checks and balances to this event. So if you're looking for that level, we've had this problem with the committee of precinct chairs. We go to the selectmen and we ask about a certain matter, and they say that's outside the scope of your responsibilities. So we need to go back and make it clear that the committee of precinct chairs does have that ability. So rather than moving more power to them where they're competing with another branch, but to establish some line of communication that gives them that level of respect back and forth between the others.
Yeah, we have a number of functions for the committee of precinct chairs we've got to discuss. But it occurs to me that we omitted to take one action. That was to pick a council before we go on to the nitty-gritty of our business. Do we have a suggestion of a law firm? You heard two of them last week. A choice between them so that I can put them on standby, get an arrangement with them. David.
I looked through my notes, and somehow I missed it, but didn't one law firm say that they preferred hybrid, they would not have somebody here, and the other law firm said, we can be available at every meeting if you want, and somehow I missed that, unless I'm not reading my notes correctly, but who said what?
The first one said hybrid,
First one?
and the second one said, Miaris and whoever.
Yeah,
Said that they would not be averse to sending a person.
So the first one was Anderson and Krieger. They said they would have somebody present, right?
No, they said,
No.
they would prefer a hybrid and could,
Hybrid,
on
Zoom,
occasion, have
right.
someone present.
And the second firm?
They said, in any case, that they wouldn't be averse to sending someone whenever we wanted someone physically present.
and as I expressed to you a couple of minutes ago, I favored the second one, and now I'm favoring them even more because they seem more flexible, so I would be in favor of the second firm,
That was the Wellesley firm of Mayaris and Harrington.
yes.
Right. Other comments on the two firms?
I-
Frank? Frank Mann?
I definitely preferred the first one. As I said, my understanding of their appreciation of the creative effort we were going to make here, their kind of excitement at that notion seemed to be authentic. I don't mind if they're just going to be here hybrid. As a matter of fact, hybrid would probably be a savings to us, considering we're going to pay for travel time for lawyers regardless. I just had a better feeling. I took the notes as we were going through. In all honesty, I felt the third one kind of mailed it in a little bit. They did do some research, but I didn't feel they had the same sort of authentic connection. That's my personal view.
Right. Frank, you said you did some research? Or didn't?
No, well, yeah, the third firm did do some research, so I'm
Okay.
saying they knew a couple of things about what we were
Right.
trying to do. They had read some of the things. So I'm not dissing them. At the same time, I just had a better feeling about the first one in terms of their compatibility with what we're trying to achieve. But that's my intuition about it. I
Right.
don't know a lot about either firm.
Okay, so other comments? We've got a diversity of opinions here. Bill, what was your view?
On the two firms?
two firms.
Yeah. Well, I think that being hybrid is an option that might be efficient, but we're still getting charged the same amount of money per hour if it's hybrid or in person. I wonder how the law firm addresses that issue, because obviously they'd have to charge to come down.
Well,
I
they're
know I'm
gonna-
starting to obsess about the cost,
The
but,
answer is they're going to charge you.
yeah, to come down and be
Right.
here.
No, the
so-
only difference is travel time, but if they're sitting in their office
Yeah.
at 7 o'clock at night on Zoom, they're going to charge you as much as if they were sitting where Joe Hutchinson is sitting.
But I was just trying to think that in one thing that we've learned during the pandemic, that hybrid and Zooming can be an efficient way of
Right.
using somebody's time. Sometimes we're going to need them here in the room, and sometimes we could get by with
Right.
Zooming with them. But I did like the experience that was being demonstrated in the presentation from the first the attorney. What firm was that?
George Hall,
Yeah.
Anderson and Krieger.
Yeah, but I did see a level of enthusiasm coming from the firm from, the second firm. They seem to be very enthusiastic. But I guess I gravitate to the first firm.
Right. Just full disclosure, I know George Hall. He was from Anderson and Krieger, and I've worked with him closely on cases probably for 20 years. And he's, I mean, it's, strictly a business relationship, but we worked on, it started with, he worked with me on Plymouth Long Beach issues for a number of years. And his specialty was environmental law, and he was a crackerjack lawyer, excellent lawyer, totally honest, straightforward, always good. Word was as good as gold. And I was always impressed with him. I don't know anyone else, though, in that firm, but he was the one that made the presentation last week. The other firm, the Wellesley firm, I have had no direct experience with. I'm not sure which family the Harrington of the firm is from, whether he's from the North Shore or not. I haven't had a chance to check that. But that was my view of the two of them. Betsy?
Is there a firm that you recommend, Bill?
Pardon me?
Is there a firm that you think would be best?
Which one?
Of the two firms, is there one that you recommend?
I just think the working relationship myself with George Hall would be excellent, because I trust him and he knows me and I know him, and, he'd do exactly what we wanted, and I think I'd have no trouble with that. But I don't want to color the decision
I mean, that's important,
based
what
on
you
it,
just
but I've
said.
known him probably since 1995.
That's important. You are the chairman and you are an attorney, so to maximize your
Right.
efficiency, I go with the first firm.
Any other questions or discussion?
I'd like to make a motion that we,
They each represent the same number of towns. It's interesting, the Anderson and Krieger, although they used to be on the North Shore, and now they've moved into Boston, their primary office, but they used to be, I think, in Gloucester, some place up on the North Shore, but they represent a lot of the towns north of Boston, whereas the other firm represents towns on the other side of Boston. It's an interesting dichotomy. But anybody want to make a motion?
I will make the motion that we utilize the first firm, George Hall,
Yep.
as our legal counsel.
And we authorize, okay, thank you. Betsy,
I second.
seconded. And if that were to pass, will we authorize to work out a business deal of the relationship, how many hours and rate and stuff like that? Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor of retention of Anderson and Krieger, please say aye. And I'm authorized to work out an arrangement to present to you guys next week, and for your approval with them,
I abstain.
right?
And I'm opposed.
You're opposed?
Yep.
Okay.
And I have no problem with working with either one, but I liked the presentation
Right.
with the second people a little better.
Well, there's nothing to say that we can't, switch horses if we don't like who we've chosen. If it doesn't work out, we'll see. All right, so we haven't voted yet. All in favor of Anderson Krieger? Yes? We did. Frank? Yep. Wrestling?
Yes.
All in favor, say aye. Let's have, because there is a
Aye.
1, 2,
No.
3, 4,
No.
Larry? 5.
No.
I got Frank. Wrestling?
Wrestling's opposed.
Opposed? And David abstains. So it looks like there's 2 opposed, 1 abstention, and 6 in favor. Let's see. Scott?
I didn't hear the presentations,
Okay, you're
so I
abstaining?
was just gonna abstain because I didn't hear the presentations, and I don't really feel. Sorry, that helps. Yeah, I was gonna
You're in
abstain because
favor?
I didn't hear the presentations, and I didn't feel like I got the complete depth that everybody else did, so.
It looks like I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor,
2 opposed,
2 opposed,
2 abstentions.
and 2 abstentions. Okay. Thank you. So that carries. So now we can go back to the COPC. The one, we've been talking about approving articles for town meeting, which is just one of several things we had listed here as potential functions and duties. Somebody mentioned earlier, I think it may have been Larry, they would be involved in the appointing process perhaps, or sharing the appointing process with, well, for example, the Charter Review Committee, which is something that was added the last charter go-around. They're on the committee with the moderator to appoint the Charter Review Committee. So we can discuss what their role should be in appointments, like to the Advisory and Finance Committee, Charter Review Committee again. Another couple of things that we had listed was the legislative follow-up and oversight, whether they should have a role enforcing the charter, and also acting between town meetings. Lynn was here at our last meeting to kind of talk to that, but they're a creature of the town meeting, and if town meeting doesn't meet for more than, twice a year, then I'm thinking they're hopefully a way to kind of bridge that gap.
Well, another thought I had in my notes was that COPC, by a 2/3 vote, could recommend to the select board that a special town meeting be called. I know, I'm just looking at our existing charter, either the select board can do it on their own in accordance with laws 39, blah, 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 and then 200 registered voters can request it. And again, I don't know if that's state law or not, but it occurred to me that perhaps with a 2/3
Yep.
majority of COPC, they could recommend to the select board that there are issues that, need the attention of a special town meeting. It was a thought.
So I'm just trying to think, what's a good way to, Larry, go ahead.
David could recommend to the select board, so could Perry's Market. Either, we can't get there are two ways of having a special town meeting. The 200 signatures or the select board. And it seems pointless to me to make believe that a recommendation, we could say it, but it has no effect.
Well, that's why I was saying, I want to be in conformance with state law,
Right.
but if COPC recommending town meeting, if town meeting is supreme, would just be, they could recommend to the select board. Now, you're right, any one person could, to persuade the 5 or 7 or 9, however many select board members we're going to have. But it just was a thought, again, just in a way to empower COPC and list it as some of the things they can do, but with a 2/3 majority. Again, I'm trying to say shouldn't be, it's sort of just at somebody's whim, but just,
Right.
there's important stuff.
It seems to make sense that if citizens can push for a town meeting, just ordinary citizens, and if the select board can call a town meeting, it seems to me it kind of follows that town meeting itself could get involved through its COPC and ask for a town meeting to be called. It gives the town meeting a purpose.
But doesn't it, we were talking about respect. If the COPC, which we're only giving the power of suggestion, makes a suggestion, and the select board says, not a good idea, that seems to be creating a collision that isn't entirely necessary. Seems to me the COPC can always recommend to the select board, and it's even if it's not written into the charter, it is if we're talking about them as the executive board of town meeting, if the executive board of town meeting says we think it would be useful to have a town meeting.
No, but I thought David was suggesting a mandatory thing, not just a suggestion.
No.
With two-thirds
Yeah,
vote, you would be able to-
Unless the, state law allows it. I mean, if the state law allowed it, I think that would be an alternative way to call a special town meeting.
Right.
But if state law says it's either of 200 voters or the select board, I was trying to live within that and say that but you could list it as one of their
Right.
opportunities or responsibilities to recommend to select board.
So do we know whether state law allows it or not?
I've never, this is where
Counselor.
the Collins
Comes in handy,
Center
right.
or an attorney would be useful,
But it
because
seems to
I've
me that-
never heard any town that has done it, which isn't the same as no town can do it.
Okay, Betsy?
That may be another good reason for Collins to be on board
Right.
to help us.
They will be at our
With
next meeting.
18 precincts, it would be pretty easy to gather up 10 signatures per precinct. So the committee of precinct chairs could be in charge of getting 10 or 12
It's just that,
signatures from each
we're-
of their precincts pretty quickly.
I mean, I picture town meeting as will be a cohesive, well-informed group of representatives that can act kind of as a body, kind of as and that through the precinct chairs, that maybe they should have this power to call a town meeting.
Yeah, and I don't know if they do.
If it's legal.
They can, I don't know, but let me go back to the respect thing just quickly so I don't lose track of it. One of the things I noticed at our last town meeting is I don't know that we had enough respect for our public audience. For example, we hired a new librarian with no presentation at all to town meeting. So the TV audience never got to hear why we needed a new librarian. And there were a number of other things, I think, in town meeting that were not presented in town meeting because probably most town meeting members had already seen the presentation for them and they'd read the book and so forth. But I think that we need to have more sense that we have an audience, that we have people out there who are wondering why we're doing what we're doing and why we're voting what we're voting. And I think we'd have a lot more support from people if they heard, here's why this particular expenditure is necessary, or here's why we're voting on this particular article. So some articles got an enormous amount of talk. And other articles just got passed when I think they were pretty significant articles. So I think that might be something we want to look at. I'm not sure where that will come in, but really making sure, maybe it's what Joe is going to talk about, making sure that our TV audience on town meeting day is hearing the arguments.
David?
Thank you.
Couple things, if I may, through you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, I think it's extremely important that the committee of precinct chairs at a 2/3 vote is able to suggest to the selectmen that there is a special town meeting. And they can present it to them as I'm a member of the Harbor Committee and we make suggestions all the time. And I think that this is an important thing to do for committee of precinct chairs. Not to go out and get signatures, to give them the opportunity to say, hey, look, because I really think committee of precinct chairs need to be a two-way street. Yes, they're gonna bring to town meeting, okay, this is what's happening with this warrant, this is what's happening with the firehouse, this is what's happening with this. But they also need to say, hey, I've gotten 12 emails from my constituents and 5 calls about this. I think that's where we really need to look at this is this two-way street. And talking about different articles getting more time at town meeting, personally, I think we should have done a little postmortem about the town meeting, just to discuss a couple things that I was really upset with, but I'll leave it there.
Wrestling, if you have points from the town meeting that make sense in a discussion, bring it up as an example. But let me just be clear on what you were suggesting. You said COPC should be able to suggest to the selectmen.
They should be
Anything more
able to
powerful
say,
than?
we would like to have a special town meeting, present to the selectmen, after
Yep,
doing
Frank,
a
you're next.
two-thirds vote, bring it to them and say, we need to have a special town meeting.
Yeah, but the select
And-
board would just as easily say, we don't agree with you, go away.
Yes, they could. Yes, they could. But one of the things that I'm working towards is having a government that listens to their people. I think that that's where we really need to get into the nitty gritty of,
Okay, Right. Frank, man?
I agree totally. I'm someone who truly believes that we're working on a charter. A charter is language. Language can be made honed down and made more specific, more forceful. I think there should be language. If there was language in the charter that said that the COPC can recommend a town meeting be held with a two-thirds vote, it'd be very difficult for the select board to ignore that. They've been ignoring a lot of things and processes, in my opinion. I think if it's in the charter, it has weight, it has heft. That's what we're working on, is the language of the charter. And I'll go back now to the planning board. Larry Pizer, all these things intersect, obviously, but Larry Pizer brought up what is the planning board's role, and other people talked about we don't want to step on other people's toes. The language in the charter today says that the planning board should be implementing the master plan.
Right.
And in my opinion, it's not. And if we emphasize that, if the language was changed and we had all these other things in this regard, I think it'd be a lot easier to achieve that. There's a lot of language let's not forget the planning board and the relationships that are outlined there as we modify this charter as well. But again, language is really important, and it'd be very hard for any board to disregard something that's in the chart, explicitly in the charter.
So is it the view of the commission that the COPC's function here, or they would have the authority to, assuming they feel they have the town meeting behind them, that they would be able to go to the selectmen and recommend that the COPC has taken a two-thirds vote and is recommending the selectmen we have a town meeting?
I move that we put language in the charter that says the COPC, after a two-thirds vote, can go before the selectmen and request a special town meeting.
Right. Betsy?
I would like to amend your motion, if it's okay with you, Wrestling, and that is within a certain amount of time. I'm looking on the Mass Legislator, the mass.gov website, and if it says if 200 people petition the select board for a special town meeting, the select board has to respond within 45 days. Well, that's a long time. So that's what, maybe I'm reading it wrong, but anyway, I think we should add a time frame, Wrestling, that they have to respond within a certain amount of time, maybe.
David, what's the?
I'd like to get this in the charter and then talk to legal counsel about the language.
Yeah, but if they say, yeah, we'll do a special town meeting in 3 months, if we're trying to.
I think, Betsy, we can decide to put this in the charter, and then we get the verbiage with the timing, at another
Okay.
point.
Okay, thank you.
I agree. I mean, our current language talks about select board going within 14 days of, prior notice, and then the 45 days. So I think that's fine tuning it, but we get the concept agreed to.
So it was 14 days to call it out to 45 days?
Well, our current language says, as provided in general laws 3910, blah, blah. Select board may, anytime upon at least 14 days prior notice, call a special town meeting. So the 14, I'm trying to find ways to sort of live within whatever the statutory notices are. Because we have other, responsibilities to report and distribute information to town meeting members and things, so there's, we need to live within also some degree of reality.
Okay, so,
Mr. Chairman,
David,
you have a motion. I don't know if it was seconded, but I will second Wrestling's motion,
Betsy's motion.
the amended motion.
He didn't accept my amendment.
So all in favor, I think wrestling between you and Betsy, we do have a motion?
I don't think wrestling accepted my amendment, David.
I did not accept your amendment because that's something we can talk about at a future date.
Okay, then withdraw your amendment.
That's fine tuning.
Oh, yeah, they didn't
Okay.
accept it.
Yeah.
so-
Okay, so I will move I will second Wrestling's motion, and then I
Thank
just have something to discuss.
All right, is any further discussion on wrestling's motion as seconded by Dave Malgudy? All clear? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
So that's the authority of the COPC.
And opposed? You can ask for the opposed or abstains.
Pardon me? Larry did not cast a vote. Anybody opposed to the motion?
Yes, I am opposed,
You're opposed,
yes.
okay.
Now, the question that I have, which needs to be answered by somebody, the Collins Institute, or perhaps you can even look it up online. I may be wrong on this. I've been known to be wrong before, and I'm certainly going to be wrong again, I'm sure. But I distinctly remember in the early days of my tenure, and it might have been back in the Andy Colas days as town clerk, I distinctly remember you could call a special election in 10 days. I'm sorry, special town meeting in 10 days. And I don't know if you can still do that, but I distinctly remember that back in the 80s, you could do it within 10 days. If that's possible, that would take a lot of the strain out of people saying, town meeting only meets twice a year, it doesn't meet
Right.
often enough. So if that's legal, I'd like to pursue that.
If I may, I think we can make it legal, and that's the question whether we want to. The reason that you can't have a town meeting within 10 days is not state law. It's the requirement that the town meeting be advised by whatever committee. Right now, it's the Advisory and Finance Committee. And in order to meet the 10 days, we would have a raw town meeting of 162 members sitting there without someone saying to them, we've thought about this and researched it. That's where the time comes in. So we can do it. I mean, we could say the annual town meeting, the fall annual town meeting requires, 14 days, Finance Committee has to vote on certain things, and specials don't. There's a question whether we want to, but that's where the 10-day elongation comes in.
Then I would like the elongation shortened to the minimum.
Yes, Betsy. I can't hear you.
Yes, please.
I'm sorry, I have Chapter 39, Section 10 right here, if you'd like me to read the first sentence. It says, "Every town meeting or town election, except as hereinafter provided, shall be called in pursuant of a warrant under the hands of the selectmen, notice of which shall be given at least 7 days before the annual town meeting or an annual or special election, and at least 14 days before any special town meeting." 14 days, so. Right.
Okay.
But it goes on to say that if it's a petition by the town voters, then they have to have that town meeting within 45 days.
Do you agree that the first assignment of the Collins Center will be to try to get this wording, start the drafting of it so we can begin to look at actual language for COPC?
Yes, that was my intent.
Right.
The reason that I was opposed to Wrestling's motion is because I think I would like to finish it now, not say we'll postpone it, because if we keep postponing things, we'll have this whole backlog. So I think while we're on the topic, now would be a good time to talk about everything to do
Well,
with
it
it.
seems
and
like
then-
this is a hot topic. We're in the middle of discussing it, and we hire them, and they come, I hope, at our next meeting, which is not for 2 weeks, unfortunately, but that they be present and we deal with this.
All I'll say is, that's why there's the process of recommending to Select Board, I was trying to live within the 14 days within the statute, which still is a lot better than 45 days.
Wait, Larry Pizzer.
Looking at 3910 in Mass General Laws, it does say that there are two ways to call a town meeting. It doesn't say there are only
Right.
two ways. So I don't think that we could make it so that 100 people couldn't, or 200 people, excuse me, couldn't force the Select Board to call a town meeting. But it's not out of the question that
Sounds
we
like
could
we may
come
be
up
able to
with
do it. Right.
another
Good.
method if we chose.
Excellent. Thank you. Very good. So let's, what is it, about 8:10? So, do you want to take a break? And Mr. Hutchinson is, on his own time, has put together a presentation for, in addition to our charter. And this would be a good time to do it, I think. '17. I have to say, Mr. Hutchinson was involved in his previous town with charter work, and in fact has even worked with Michael Ward at the Collins Center.
We can't hear anything.
He said that he highly recommends Collins because he's worked with them.
The slideshow.
Very good.
So I wanted to talk about the benefits of communications and community engagement. You folks in the early,
Is the mic on?
I think, is the mic not on? It's on in the room. I'm doing as much as I can.
Would it be possible for somebody else to advance the slides for you?
I don't know, you could potentially, when you sit here,
Okay,
and use this microphone,
and you'll hit the,
and I'll hit the button.
that's very gracious of you. Okay. Can you hear me now?
We're getting there.
No.
It doesn't sound like,
Frank,
Frank and
in wrestling, can you hear Joe? Can you hear me? Yeah.
I
Apparently,
heard David.
they heard David. What's going
And
on,
so
Joe?
maybe I need to come back next week, huh?
Get up closer.
I'm not sure why it's not
That's good.
cooperating.
Oh,
That's good now.
They can hear now. Good.
Have you got it?
Yep.
Okay, good. So basically, what I was saying was that for the first few, for the first weeks and months of conversations at the commission, topics were interlaced these topics were interlaced among many other topics. But basically, some of the challenges that Plymouth faces have to do with transparency, accountability, and voter turnout. And my thought is that a department with a director for communications and community engagement can help solve to those problems. And you flip the slide, David. There you go. Okay, I'm one past that. There you go. So my request to the town is to define a communications and community engagement strategy as part of the charter. I'd like to see you guys craft some language in there, and I have the fundamentals later in the slides for being able to do that. And basically, what I want you to do is redesign and re-implement the town website and create programmatic outreach to communities and neighborhoods in the town. Next slide, we can keep going over that. I'll go to, because I'm going to go fast here, redesign the town website for clarity, information and data availability, and community engagement. Basically, clarity means the visual clarity of the, yeah, the next one. Or no, back one. Sorry. I'm not up with you. So go to the next one, see what happens. All right, so refocus, what I was saying on this slide was I'd like to refocus town-based information and data for residents. So right now, the way the town hall works is the town website, in my humble opinion, is designed around the work processes and work products of the internal departments at town hall. And its focus is not at the residents. It's at helping town workers work more efficiently. And so I want to take advantage of the data and information that they've been collecting and put that outbound to the community. And the way that I would do that is, next slide. Yes. So I want to make the town website a destination. And basically, ease of access and navigation would enable that. And the way you do that is by a redesign of the interface for the website. You devise a taxonomy that makes sense, and I'll explain that in a minute. You make it comprehensive, make it consistent across all town departments, and you make a focus on residents. And just my personal bias is to add an attitude of service to it. Make the residents think that we are in fact welcome as a town to listen to them and tell our stories with them. So here's an example of a taxonomy. So, and this, Larry will forgive me, or not. But this is the town clerk's website on the left here, and you can see the great blue panel that's variegated in shades of blue, along with any number of.
Joe Hutchinson, hi, it's Bill over here. Sorry. Could you go back about a fist's length away from your microphone, because you're really coming in loud. I'm not sure if anybody's noticing that. It's hard. Just like, go about that far away, it was overpowering.
I'll give it a
Hard to
shot.
concentrate.
Let me know. Okay, good. The panel on the left there is any number of choices that you would have, and hard to pick out which of the choices might fit for what you are actually trying to look for. And the panel on the right is some set of blobs of black type that are difficult to navigate and absorb. Whereas if you had a taxonomy, which is the categorization of topics into logical blocks, then you would be able to look for voter registration information, how to find your polling place, what are the voting procedures, what are the upcoming and past information about upcoming and past elections, and if there's a requirement for special services, then that would be in there too. So basically, the taxonomy allows for easier navigation. That's the point of it. And this brings me to the next slide, which is data that is available publicly. So this, for example, is a data dashboard from the Massachusetts Department of Transport. Am I okay here? Okay. Massachusetts Department of Transportation. And you can see that Plymouth has entered data. I mean, this is public data that gets collected in town hall. So the town clerk has a data set. The DPW has a data set. We're collecting all this data, and what I want to do is make it visible to the town. And I want to make it visual, and I want to make it clear and relevant. So what you see here is the Mass Department of Data grabbing our Mass Transportation, grabbing our data and formatting it for a summary of bridges in Plymouth. And you can see that you have some number of, we have 41 bridges. The average age is 50 years. Little over half of them are in fair condition. It goes, you can get any number of data points out of the data that we already collect. So these kinds of dashboards lend themselves to lots of topics. You know, the DPW we could count DPW work orders and generate next slide, Dave, thank you. We could generate a map of the potholes in town. And, you know, that's just one of the things that we would like to get residents used to going and looking for. This makes the website attractive to residents because it lets them update the status on a day-by-day basis. So, you know, it creates demand and it can generate conversation. And I believe that the more conversations that we're able to have about the town, the more people will turn out to vote. That's kind of where this is all coming from. Likewise, the data dashboard lends itself very nicely to budget indexing, and you can see there that you know, there's the fiscal 21 budget proposal. It could have been the fiscal 22. Lynn puts that stuff up there. The organization chart for Finance Committee and our Finance Department. And then that other information. Okay, so the other thing that, and Bill and Wrestling will be happy about this, is these kinds of dashboards can lend themselves not just to the sucking up data and putting it into pictures, but also laying out project plans, project templates. And so this is an example of the Brook Road Bridge. And what you might be able to do with a project plan, if we had the data on the bridges from the Mass Department of Transportation and a timeline from JB, we would be able to map a project plan for when the Brook Road Bridge might get resolved and how much it might cost to do that, and what are the logical choices that we might have in pursuing such a solution. So there's that. And I had a slide in here that I thought, and you know, it was on Stevens Field, which is why I thought that Bill and Wrestling would like it. So in any event, you could do the same thing with Stevens Field. The project plan, the roadblocks, the proposals, all of it. It lends itself very, very well to transparency of projects in town and to the accountability that you might want as a town meeting member, as a resident of the town. So the other big job that I was including in this proposal has to do with pushing town website data / programming to the community. So we have Plymouth 400 and See Plymouth as partners. These are folks who help us advertise the town. We likewise, and the identity and character of the town, I think, depends on that. And we likewise could have partnerships with conservation entities like the Audubon, Wildlands Trust, and so forth. And we could use the town website to push that partnership, or those partnerships, and push that kind of information to the town, making it convenient for town residents, tourists, whatever other target audience you might want to take advantage of those features. And this is how the next slide, Dave. There you go. And so this is how the town of Amherst does it. And David, who is sitting over here, there is this role, the communications director. Amherst did this a while back, and they've gotten really good at it. So this picture right up here shows you how they managed to push that kind of data at their residents. And likewise, you know, Amherst has this role written into their charter. And you know, if you need a way to specify language, that's a place to begin. But I don't know whether you might have looked, David, but there are many other towns that have the role. So you know, plenty of places to go to figure out how do we write this in specifically for Plymouth. What would the Director of Communications and Engagement do? I caught a typo there. Basically focus on residents and provide transparency, accountability, and mission clarity. If you go across our website right now and look for consistency of definition of the mission for any of the departments, you'll find enormous variation. Some don't, I mean, you guys have been talking about the COPC. COPC doesn't even list a mission statement. So how would you know? So, you know, you would be consistent across all the departments, and that would help, you know, the residents understand, well, what are you doing and how does it help? And so to do that, though, you need skills that are kind of unique. The woman on the left here is Catherine Ware. She is a recent hire by the schools department, and I was so happy when I saw the article in the OCM, because she's exactly what we need on the town side. She has a mix of technology skills, system analysis skills, as well as communication skills. I'm not sure she does outbound programs, but by and large, using her as a model and talking to her and getting guidance from her in defining this would be, you know, right around our corner. She would be happy to help, I'm sure. So what is the pay scale for this? How much would it cost us? You know, this is a tough one. It depends on whether you want an entry-level person, but I believe that you need at least a mid-level person with pretty high-level skills. So I'd look beginning at the 80K range. And the other thought that I had, though, in this is that you could probably make this provisional. So write it into the charter and then figure out how to pay for it, whether you want to pay for it as a permanent employee, whether we want to try it first and then fit it in as we go. I think that it would pay for itself, frankly. So what I'm recommending is the next step be a chapter 8 of a new charter. So that's my proposal. The other two slides I really don't need to go through. So if you guys have questions, I'd be happy to talk about it. Betsy.
How would it pay for itself, this position, please? You said, I think that it would pay, you were talking about the pay for this new position, and you said, I think it would pay for itself. I think that was what you said.
Probably shouldn't have said it quite so fast. You know, it's one of these things that over time, people grow very dependent on it. And I think you would find that it paid for itself in goodwill to the town, not necessarily in the cost of the service. So I think it's worth providing the clarity, the transparency, the accountability, and that people would find that really to be a major benefit.
Yeah, I'm 100% for the idea. I just didn't know if you had a grant or something you were talking about.
No, my bet is that you could find a grant, but, and in fact, I'll ask Catherine about that and see if I can find something. I'll follow that up.
One of the towns that I looked at for the Charter Commission was the town of Dartmouth, and they have a
Dartmouth?
town of Dartmouth, Mass, and they do a pretty good job on their website of reporting, right on the very first page of the website, what's going on in town.
So Dartmouth, I've got Dartmouth, Somerville,
Betsy, you say Dartmouth has something like this in the chart?
Amherst, okay,
Excuse me.
I can do that.
Excuse me. Up here on the wall.
Oh, it's
Hi,
Frank.
Frank Mann.
We've all spoken about that. We understand the need in this day and age to have a more overt attempt to let people know what's going on. One of the things I don't see in this, and I'm sure it is in some capacity, but this is a lot of pushing data to information. What I've seen as a core element in the success of something like this is somehow allowing that information to come back as well. That is, for people to feel like they're being heard, not just have information they can act on, not just be able to access information, but be able to speak out and have it be heard. Remember a long time ago, I was running for select board and I was looking at community engagement models around the country and the world, and I was surprised to find Korea. We don't, I don't want to culturally stereotype Koreans, but I don't think I would have expected that they would be on the forefront of this, but they have many institutions where they solicit feedback from the people and make sure that they understand it's being heard in a variety of ways. Also, anticipating that this would be a slow thing to start financially, it'd be hard nut to get people to swallow. I think there's some practical, other real things we need to do. I've had the experience throughout my time as a newspaper writer and as a member of various boards in this town of being amazed at how, I don't want to use the word ignorant, but let's say disinterested people are in how their government works, how it functions. I heard the other day, not casting any aspersions, a couple town employees talking about aspects of town meeting coming up and not realizing how it functions. You would think they would be very interested in how town meeting functions. But not only do our employees not know, but the vast majority of the people in the street that live in this town, that live outside the penumbra of downtown and people that are involved in things, they don't know how their government works. That 90% of people not voting, one of the reasons is they have busy lives, but they don't know how it functions. They don't know how it works. They don't know who's elected and who's not elected. I've heard a lot of strange things in that regard. We need to do a better job of telling people in a real way how government works and how they can participate in, where they can go to get information. I had this corny idea, and I still think it's a good idea. We have, the downtown probably has now 6 to 10 giant flea markets or fairs or antique festivals or whatever. I think we should have one that's all about civic engagement in town government, where people go around and every board and committee is represented. Maybe there's a dunk tank for the Board of Select Persons. But that general idea, let's make it real for people. Again, though, I want to say I appreciate all the work that Joe's done here. We need to do that. I don't know how quickly we can get to it, but we need to have pushed, and whatever the term is, Joe, that information is also coming back to us. Thanks.
Yep, I agree, and I was trying to go fast because I was worried about timing. And, the first topic that you brought up was social media, and that would be one of the one of the elements of the director's job description. And it's actually in the notes for the slide. I didn't want to go through all the things that she does, but that's the sort of thing that she does. And that makes, that provides a level of interactivity, which is what you were asking for, I think. You know, we could, you know, I think she does a Facebook page, she does Twitter, she does, well, I don't know. I would have to go through the list, but, so there's that. How the town works is a little harder as problems go, I think, because it's complicated. And, you know, just personally, what I've done, what I did in Precinct 12, well, in Red Brook, was hold meetings, Civics 101, for how the town works. And in fact, you know, on March 17th, I guess, is maybe when it was, when COVID shut us down, I had Melissa and Lynn scheduled to come in and talk about the levy. People, the first thing that people tell me when I ask, this is just a recent story, I won't go on too long, but, you know, I've got to recruit candidates for Precinct 17. It's a new precinct. We don't have any, I'm the only, well, the two of us are remnants from Precinct 12. Remnants, that's not flattering.
Relics.
But the first thing that people tell me when I go ask them, listen, we need folks to step up and help us out, is I don't know enough about town meeting. And so I've had to develop what amounts to a visual spreadsheet that I talk to. But this seems to me to be happening kind of at the town meeting level. I don't know if we can do all that with, this feels like it needs to be kind of a grassroots programmatic thing that you might be able to support on the website with predefined templates for courses and how-tos and lists of people who can help you and things like that. But, you know, people have to step up and volunteer, I think, at the grassroots level for this. I could, you know, I'm happy to listen to any ideas that get that off of my back personally, so.
Mary's got a
And
question, Joe.
Back in the olden days, when I was the town clerk, there really was a cartoon on my wall that said, "Why is it that every time I have a good idea, someone brings up the budget?" Indeed. I don't think that there are two parts. One is, I remember not very long ago when we didn't have a website. I remember after we got a website, when we didn't have a very good website, and it's a whole lot better now than it was then. And your idea would make it much better still. Then the question comes up, what is the role of the charter committee to do this sort of thing? As recently as today, I had to deal with the clerk's website. It was 14th on my list of 14 important things to do. It was important, but you know, so was running an election. Yep. So the idea that you're talking about is convincing the people who set the budget that this is a goal that ought to be met. Because the reason that the website isn't quite as good as it could be is the person who runs the website, that's one of his many responsibilities. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure that you would get anybody to disagree with your idea. I think all of us are on board with the idea that going in, as Frank said, in both directions, going out and coming back, and having a really good website that people can go to, and taking action to get people involved in the website, get them to tell us what their email is, and, you know, send something to them to come look at the website, because there's going to be an election, there's going to be a pothole on Brook Road, whatever the case is. But what would be useful, I think, to me, would be for you to distill that chapter 8 that you talked about, and show us what we want to say in chapter 8
Yeah.
in the charter, and then we can deal in a much more effective and efficient way whether or not we can include this sort of thing. You know, I understand you talk about numbers and how much we're going to pay. Somebody else's responsibility. You know, our responsibility is to say, what is it that the town ought to be doing? And then we create a document that enforces that.
Right. I'm sorry.
David?
I think it's a great idea, and I think it's long overdue. But I see the creation of another whole department. And I'm thinking long-term, because one person isn't going to do this. It's going to take more than one. And therefore, I think it's going to be a whole new department, Department of Information, Department of Information/engagement, whatever. And I see 2 or 3 people working here. So I think it's a great idea, but I think it's going to be costly, so we have to see how we can work it in. I don't know if this is something we can do through the hotel motel tax. You know, I don't know if it's possible, if you could even do it, but if we could find a source of revenue, that would make it a lot easier.
Yeah, our funding source would be a good idea.
Bill, a resident just sent me an email and asked, is there a town with a good dashboard that, you know of? Is there one town that has a good dashboard?
Well, where I started looking at this, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months ago, and, have I got your seat, David?
No, you got my seat. so, yeah.
And the first place I looked was Somerville, because they popped up, and they had what I thought, these pictures in here are largely from Somerville. So that's where I would go first.
So thank you for that. So we could actually look at Somerville and Amherst and ask them who's doing it and how much they're getting paid, perhaps. And thank you, you did a great job giving us this presentation. And one of the things I'm also wondering about.
Let me just say, I looked at Somerville for the data portal stuff, and I'm not sure how Amherst might have done that, but my bet is that Amherst might be a little more refined, so, but I don't know that, so.
My other question was, do you see the library being a way to communicate with people? Because we have we have a lot of library staff, and we have a big library, and a lot of people go to the library, so maybe there's some way they could also be involved.
Right, and in fact, the person who does the library's website, I know very well. Yes, that's a possibility. And also seems to me to be functionally a fit. That's a good idea.
I'd just add, another department or group in Plymouth that does a good job is the Center for Active Living. Those folks are terrific. Having looked at Amherst, and I think it's inappropriate to look at multiple towns, I have this sense that Amherst put it in their charter as sort of an important thing, but they filled it with existing people. They didn't create a new department, but they said this is really important, and they sort of built it, with transfers and stuff. But we should learn how others have done it. But I think it's a terrific idea, and we have skill sets in this town, in the library, the Center for Active Living, and the schools.
So it sounds like the commission is of a mind, Joe, to pursue this?
I'm sorry, say again.
I said the commission appears to be of a mind to pursue this as a possible addition to the charter, if you can help us draft the appropriate language for our new chapter 8.
Yes, that's the first thing I'll do, because Larry needs it. And funding source is something I think we can discuss. But I think we could brainstorm about that. That's, I mean, the volunteer cadre might be right there among us, who knows? So, okay. And
So
what
thank-
else? So I've got two things on my action list. I got one is the language. And I would go, Larry, to, as I said, you know, the towns that already have the language there, and I'd fuss with that first, and I would come up with something specific for Plymouth. And then I would try to get some ideas about funding sources. So those are the two things, and you guys can, well, when it comes up, then I'll come back.
Thank you very much, Joe, for
Yep.
introducing that to us.
Thank you for your help.
Hey, Joe, I just want to say you did a real good job with that. Joe,
I'm sorry.
over here.
Oh, Scott.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I think you did a real good job with that. I appreciate it.
Thank you, thank you.
Very good, Joe. We're grateful. Thank you. Michelle, do we have anybody present for public comment?
No hands raised at this time.
Nobody.
Nobody's
Okay.
got their hand up.
All right. So we have a few more minutes to continue for now and then put on hold our COPC discussion until next time, at which point I would hope to have Colin Center here to help us with the actual language. The making of appointments and how it relates to the Advisory and Finance Committee, do you have a specific suggestion that they will somehow get involved with the appointing process? With the moderator. David?
Well, again, I'll just reiterate, just for discussion purposes, 5 members from the, appointed by the selectmen, 5 members by the COPC, and 5 members appointed by the moderator. That would split it up a little bit. I suspect it's no easy task, because I know the moderator has had difficulty in the past finding applicants, and I would stick with the 3-year terms, which would mean 5 per year. Then we get into a situation that you don't have
Right.
even numbers to appoint, so we'll have to think about that.
Bill? Well, 2/3 of a person's not so hard. No, I mean, I don't think that's insurmountable. The question that we need to consider is one that was brought up 2 years ago, for whenever it was, 4 years ago now, my God. Is there a need for speed in appointments? What happens if someone resigns at a touchy time? Does that matter? I think
Right.
before we divide into appointment by a group that might meet monthly, what happens if the day after their meeting, someone resigns? We need to take that into consideration if we're going to do this. There are 2 ways of doing it. One is we could say that in the absence of the committee, the chair can make a temporary appointment, or the moderator can make an appointment subject to the veto of the committee, so that the person would serve until, but that's something that if we're going to involve committees in making these appointments, that's something we really need to take into consideration.
And then David, I think, raised the question of qualifications of a Finance Committee member?
Yeah, we've certainly heard that from,
Right.
past commentators, that, because, and this applies more than FinCom, but while we're talking about FinCom, it would be nice to put language in there, sort of, credentials preferred or something, that we get people who are familiar with numbers and familiar, can dive deep. I'm not quite sure what that would be, because you don't want it to preclude any appointment, but we
It
certainly.
would make sense if they're going to just be reviewing financial articles.
Right, especially if we reduce their responsibilities, that we add a sentence or two that in the appointment process,
Okay. David?
experience or credentials,
Right.
preferred.
I think the word preferred is key here, because I remember years ago when I was on the Finance Committee, Yvonne Resens, God rest her soul and God bless her, my God, that woman was sharp. I mean, she just questioned everything, and she had good points. And I can remember some other very, very good Finance Committee members, not necessarily CPAs. So experience preferred but not required.
Bill, I sent to all town meeting members, and I know it was long, a video copy of Subcommittee E's meeting this spring. Subcommittee E was handling the library, the senior center, the veterans department, and a total of 8 different departments. And so I had written to Kevin Canty, the chairman of Advisory and Finance, I would like to see the minutes of the subcommittee. He sent us the minutes of the Advisory and Finance Committee meetings, but not the minutes of the subcommittees. And it's really in the subcommittees that that digging deep takes place, not in the actual Advisory and Finance meetings, from what I could tell from the minutes. So he said that the subcommittees are not producing any minutes at all, but I could look at the video. So I was pretty surprised at that. I didn't think there was much deep digging. So I'll send that 90 minutes, and people can look at it. But I know they meet with the departments, and so I watched it. And so each department got about 10 minutes on this video. Now, I don't know if they meet, also go to the library and talk to them there, and they go to the senior center and talk to them there. But when I asked Kevin Canty, was there a follow-up meeting or previous meeting? He said no. There was this one subcommittee meeting, and all the department heads were there. Barry de Blasio, for example, as well as Kelsey, whose last name just dropped out of my head. But Casey was there as well. But I didn't see a lot of deep diving or a lot of heavy questioning or anything like that. And I think sometimes town meeting members who have been a town meeting member for a long time would have more experience with what do we really need to know than maybe somebody new to Advisory and Finance. So I strongly believe we should have some town meeting members attending all of these subcommittee meetings. No, but I don't know if they're open meetings. I don't know if they're listed on the town website. So, but I think that all of these subcommittee meetings should have town meeting members there as well. Thank you.
Well, you're raising an
Larry-
issue, should every subcommittee meeting have minutes?
We don't have to.
You don't have?
No,
but
that's
could
state
we-
law.
Could we
It's
request
state
that?
law. Every subcommittee must have minutes, period. It's easy. If you have a question, I think the person in charge of open meetings is in the manager's office. Go to him, tell him that you didn't get those minutes. They have to, period. I'm done.
So they have to keep them, period, right?
Yeah, but
They have to
Kevin, I
not
got an
only keep
email.
them, they have,
have-
the rules are they have to submit them to this a program, a computer program, overseen by the clerk's office, and there's no ability of a committee to appoint a subcommittee that doesn't have the same responsibility. So it is an open meeting. They have to post the meeting, they do, and they have to take minutes.
I think it'd be great to have a couple of
Okay.
town meeting members at each one of those meetings, whether it's in the charter or not. Maybe the COPC could somehow facilitate having 2 town meeting members at every subcommittee meeting.
All right, I want to let Bill Cohan make a comment.
Okay, yes, so just to be, I'm familiar with the subcommittee process. I've watched it now, interested, some of us have served on the FinCom, but the subcommittee is kind of, it's another example of, there's an intention there, but there's nothing really substantive about it. Meaning that when the town goes to build a budget, the select board will meet with the town manager and set out their priorities, and then the town manager starts to build this budget by going to the department heads and asking the department heads, what do you want in your, what would you like to see for your department? And they go back and forth. And then at that point, at that late point, they have a subcommittee meeting and they bring in FinCom people to hear what has already happened. There's not a lot of constructive events where the FinCom is involved in building a budget. There is a subcommittee process, but that subcommittee process has to be carefully looked at, and we have to put some skin in the game where the FinCom is brought in on a much earlier point in time when they build this budget. So their opinions are reflected. So that subcommittee process needs to be elevated and defined. Thank you.
Okay, we're jumping ahead to the Finance Committee. That's-
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought that's what we were talking about.
No, that's good, but it's going to have a couple nights of its
Okay.
own. So, thank you. We have new business. Is there any new business? Any old business?
Chairman?
Don't hear any
Mr.
wrestling?
Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to, looking at town meeting, there was a couple things that really
Right?
depressed me when I was looking at our form of government. And one of them was the fire station that, because we were remote, calls were going. I had 4 people tell me that they got phone calls, you gotta bring this up, you gotta bring this up. And because there's new information, there was no new information except that now they have asbestos in a building that was built after asbestos. And I've talked to numerous town meeting members and the selectmen. Nobody heard about the asbestos until town meeting floor. And that really concerns me because that is something that we should have known before town meeting.
Right.
And I think that, when we're looking at our form of government, somebody needs to stand up and say, whoa, 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 what's this? We need some more information. And it's nobody says we need more information to vote on this. And, it just concerns me. I've got 2 brand-new town meeting members who called me after town meeting and said, what's with FinCom? Every single article was 11 to 0 to 0. Don't they have any discussion? Aren't they, looking at this? And I think that's, something we really need to look at. And I just, I was deeply concerned that, that was the backroom deal, and I just very upset about it.
Right. Good point, Russ. Thank you. Any other old business from town meeting? So it being 9 o'clock, we've agreed to start meeting every week on Mondays. I hope at the next meeting we'll have a representative from the Collins Foundation, the Collins Center here, so we can get really started with the COPC and deal with that, then the Finance Committee and so forth as we head through the charter. But I think the common theme is what's broken, what needs to be fixed with respect to each of these town agencies or organs, whatever you want to call them.
Bill, before we adjourn,
Yes.
I'm correct that next Monday is not a meeting because it's a holiday?
Right, next Monday is not a meeting because it's Patriots' Day, and next meeting is 2 weeks from tonight. Right.
Also, Mr. Chairman, I see on the agenda approval of the April 4th minutes. Were you about to get to that?
April 4th, are they ready? No, they're not ready yet.
Already. That's okay.
They haven't been distributed, have they? No,
Oh, okay.
they're not ready yet, David, but they will be
Okay, it was on the agenda, that's all.
approved at the next meeting, right. No, when the agenda was prepared, we weren't sure what the status of the minutes would be, and tonight I was informed they're not quite ready. Any other business? Then a motion would be in order to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
To adjourn.
Seconded? All in favor of adjourning? Say aye. Thank you.